I found myself in a weird situation. I'd been living in a home which I was renting with two other roommates. We'd all lived together going on 3 years, and everything was working out great. But my one roommate, I'll call her Cheryl, decided to move to Washington for a better job opportunity. My other roommate, David, decided to move in with his girlfriend, who lived in another city about 3 hours' drive from where he currently lives, and the commute back and forth just wasn't cost effective anymore to visit her, and they were getting pretty serious, so they decided to move in together. Both my roommates gave 30 days' notice, and our lease was up at the end of June, so we collectively decided to give all of our move out notices. I couldn't afford the rent on my own here, and I didn't want to go through trying to scramble to find two new roommates, get them approved through the rental company. It was a pain. I was afraid I wouldn't find anyone in time and end up paying the entire rent amount myself, which wasn't exactly something I could do, and I didn't want to re sign another year lease on my own. So I found myself searching for a new place. I came across a couple of ads online for rooms for rent and shared housing, but nothing really sounded good. I found a group on FB for my town, and it was a shared housing and rental page. I joined the public group and decided to do a post about searching for shared housing or room for rent. I just put my basics in the post. I was a woman in her 40s, professional, worked full time, looking for shared home with kitchen, use of a private bath, or a room for rent with a private bath. I live in an area where a one-bedroom apartment can run about 3,000 a month. Between my finances and job, I definitely need a roommate situation. My divorce several years ago left me a bit financially strained as well. I'm paying off bills, and so I decided to start looking. I got a couple messages from some random men who, as you can guess, left lewd, nasty messages. I then received a message from a woman named Emily who said she had a home and she was looking for someone to split the costs. She sent me pictures of her home, which was located about 15 minutes from where I currently live. She said I would have full kitchen privileges, private bath, private entry to my bedroom, which was the larger room. She was asking $175 less than what I had posted, and that included utilities and internet Wi-Fi, which that sounded amazing. I asked her when I could arrange for us to meet and I could look at the home. She told me she would let me know and asked for my phone number, which I gave her. Emily told me she'd be in touch. Well, it was a few days later, and I'd not heard anything at all from her. I finally messaged her and asked her if the rental was still available. She did reply, telling me that yes, and then sent me this pre written application thing asking for my name, current address, landlord's name, my work info, income, etc., and a copy of my driver's license. She said she would need to do a check first before meeting, as she's had some very strange people in the past inquire about her rental. I totally understood, as it's difficult to find normal people sometimes to rent or roommate with, especially being a female and alone. So I filled out the form, sent a copy of my ID, and I waited. The next night, she texted me saying I could drive by to look at the outside of the home on Sunday afternoon, but she wouldn't be home and asked for me not to disturb any of the neighbors as they're very private people and would get upset. I told her I'll drive by, but I still would like to see the inside as well. She then texted me several pictures of the home inside. She told me that my application looked great and she really wants me as a roommate. And right now, though, she's working out of town, but wanted to secure me as her new roommate before I'd find another place. At this point, things felt fine, and I was really needing a place, and nothing else had come up that looked safe or desirable, nor affordable. My time was running short too, so I figured even if this wasn't the ideal place, I could make the most out of it. Emily told me that she would like me to agree to a 6-month lease, which I was totally fine with. She said she's a travel nurse, so she's gone a lot. She said she wouldn't be back for 4 weeks, but that if I wanted to, I could make the payment for my part of the rent and move in and pay the cleaning fee. She could just leave me the key to the home under the doormat upon payment. She said her uncle, who apparently owned the home, would be able to leave me the key. I told her I could meet her uncle to exchange payment in exchange for the key, but she said her uncle's been really sick and only agreed to leave the key under the mat once I paid. I asked how I can pay her, and she told me, well, since she's working out of town, she was not in a place to go to her bank, but said I could pay her in the form of Apple gift cards. She told me to buy three $500 cards, which would cover first month's rent and the cleaning and application fees. She said I could get the cards, scratch them off, and then give her the codes, and she would respond with a text message, which would be my confirmation that she was paid and proof if I wanted it. She then would tell her uncle to leave the key under the doormat. I went ahead and bought the cards and then texted them. She responded with a confirmation of the cards received, and that would be the payment for my rental. She then told me her uncle was very sick, but he would leave the key in 4 days. After that, I was free to move in. It was 4 days later when she texted and said that her uncle left the key and I could go ahead and move in. I waited till that Saturday, so it was a few days later when I went and got the key and started moving in. I'd been working extra shifts and I really hadn't had time to go over there and get the key and really get moved and sorted. I pulled up to the home and noticed there was no doormat. And I thought maybe it was in the back or the side door, so I went looking, but I couldn't find any doormat like she had described. I ended up texting Emily to tell her that I couldn't find the doormat, but I found that her profile was gone from my messenger. I went to see where her profile was, but couldn't find it. She either blocked me or took her profile down. I started to panic and went again to look for the key, thinking maybe my messenger was down or something was going on, something logical. But no, she was gone. I started to walk all around the outside of the home, which caught the attention of the neighbor next door, and this older man came out asking if I was with the new realty company. And I told him no, and I explained my situation. He looked a little perplexed at me. He seemed puzzled, and he said the home's been for sale for a few months and that the family that owned it had moved out of state and they had just changed real estate companies as the old realtor wasn't very successful at marketing the home for sale. He told me there'd been several people who've come by the house in the last few weeks, but I'm the only one who's walked around the outside. He told me several people had looked a little bit on the outside from their car, but then drove past slowly and drove away. I was confused at this point, but thanked him for the information and went home. I ended up telling my sister what had happened, and she looked up Emily's name online, and sure enough, her profile was still up. She had just blocked me. My sister messaged her telling her that she was going to the police about the house rental. Emily blocked her too. I Googled the address to the house and found the real estate company that was selling the home. I spoke to a man who said the owner had just listed it with their company and they'd not set everything up yet or put the signs up, but the home is listed online by another realty company for at least a month, and he told me that maybe I was involved in some kind of scam. When the home finally did get listed, it showed the inside rooms, and they did not match the rooms Emily had sent me in her photos. So I ended up Googling the photos Emily sent me, and they brought up a home for sale in New Zealand. I'd not noticed the electrical plugs when Emily sent me the pictures, but now I spotted a big difference. I think this Emily person was just taking photos of homes for sale online across the globe and mashing them together with other homes in the US for sale to make these fake rental ads. It definitely was a scam for sure, and I let the admins of the group know what happened. The admin told me that this happens a lot, and most people need to just do their homework before sending money and never send gift cards. They ended up banning Emily's profile. I ended up creating another profile online to find Emily. She was posting in tons of groups online across the globe offering rooms and homes for rent. Each time I saw one of her posts, I would reply under her post warning people it was a scam. I would let the admin of those groups know too. I fell for a rental scam, and the scary part is you don't know who you might meet at these houses. I got lucky in one way because the home was empty, But imagine scammers doing this and the person goes to the home and someone lives there? No telling what could happen. I finally did find a legit rental, and never again did I send gift cards through Messenger. My new roommate is awesome, and we met in person at a donut shop, and we went together to the rental agency to fill out the forms, and everything was legit. While this wasn't a romance scam, it was a scam online just the same, and people need to be very careful. That's my story. Home Sweet Home was a nightmare scam. Story 2, Room for Rent. This started last October. With things so expensive, I decided to advertise a room for rent in my home. I'm a female in my mid 60s. I own my home and it has 3 bedrooms, with one of the bedrooms having its own bathroom and private entry through a side patio. I had the idea to advertise for the room and ask for $700 a month rent. For me, though, it was a little nerve-wracking because I don't know what kind of people I might get. So I decided, instead of posting my number, I posted the room for rent on the neighborhood app. It's basically an app for people in the town you live in. I didn't post my address or again my phone number, but just my neighborhood, and told people to message me if they wanted to inquire. For the most part, this group was all locals. In fact, some of my neighbors are on the app, so I felt it was safe. However, in order to join the app, you only need to have an email address and the zip code. But I never thought I'd encounter a scammer. The first week, I didn't have any inquiries on the room. Then I received a message from a woman calling herself Margaret. She said she just moved here from Arizona and was a widow, recently lost her husband, and looking for an affordable room to rent, as she's currently living with her family temporarily and really needed her own space. She said she was 68 years old. She sent me a picture of herself and told me that she moved to be closer to family, but that she was having trouble finding a place to rent. She said she was a retired jewelry maker. I asked for her phone number, which she gave me, and told me she would be available to chat later that evening, but she had some things to do. I offered to meet her at a well-known and very busy coffee shop, but she said she had no time, that she had to go with her family to a few places today. I told her to go ahead and message me when she's free. I'll give her a call. She asked for my number, and I felt it was okay to give it to her. She asked if I had WhatsApp, which I'd never heard of, and I told her my number's local, so don't worry, just call anytime, as long as it's not after 9 p.m., as I typically go to bed fairly early. I didn't hear from her that evening, but the next morning around 8 a.m., I received a "Good morning" text. It's Margaret. I messaged her back from my phone and asked her how she is and if she'd like to meet for coffee and discuss the room rental. She told me she was babysitting her grandson, but she wanted to rent the room and asked if I could send her more pictures of the home. I went ahead and sent her a couple pictures of the room itself, the bathroom, and the side entry gate. I let her know she would have her own private entry through the patio gate, and I could work with her on a deposit, as I wanted $700 a month rent plus a $200 cleaning deposit. But I told her she could pay $100 the first month for the cleaning deposit and 100 the second, just to cover everything, as I understood finances are tight, especially people like us being retired. She thanked me for my kindness and told me she would go ahead and take the room, but she was so busy watching her grandson due to her daughter-in-law being sick. I inquired if she wanted to try and meet up tomorrow. She could bring her grandson and we could meet for coffee and exchange the rent, part of the deposit, and then I'll draw up a leasing agreement. She asked me the location of the rental, as she said she was confused where it was because this town is new to her. She then sent me a photo of herself and who I thought was her with her grandson. I had no indication that this was anyone but a genuine person, so I gave her the address. She told me she was looking forward to moving and that she will drop a check for the rent and deposit. I reminded her she can do 1 month cleaning deposit and spread out the payment, but she said she will give me $700 plus $200 in full. She told me she'd be in touch and to go ahead and draw up the lease, and she wanted to sign a 1-year lease, as she planned on staying, and she knew we would be great roommates, that she loves to cook and she will make me delicious meals. I told her it'd be fun and maybe she can join me as I'm a volunteer at the community center. It seemed like really perfect or maybe too good to be true. Margaret sent another picture of herself with who she said was her son and sick daughter in law, who she told me was battling breast cancer. I felt bad and understood why she wanted to live closer, but she shared with me their home was too small with the kids and all the pets they have, that she wanted peace, quiet, and her own space. Margaret said she had to go and she would be in touch to get the payment. I felt confident things would be fine. I did, however, grow concerned as I didn't hear from her for quite a few days. I messaged her and asked if she's still doing okay and that I had a lease agreement drawn up so we could meet and sign it. She didn't respond to my messages. I did, however, receive an overnight express letter in the mail. I wasn't expecting anything, so this was a surprise. It was an overnight envelope sent from California. The address on it was in San Diego, and the name on the envelope was Margaret. I'll leave the last name out for privacy in the event this Margaret who sent the envelope might be a real person. Inside was a check written for $2,000. The check was written on a Chase bank account, but it wasn't Margaret's name, it was a man named James. I'll leave his last name out for privacy. The address was in San Diego on the check. There was no note, nothing other than the check, and I was very confused and even checked the address to make sure it was really meant for me. I didn't cash the check right then. I messaged Margaret to inquire why this check came. Margaret told me that her daughter in law had taken a turn for the worse and she wanted the room for rent, but she was unable to get there as they had to suddenly go to a specialist at a hospital a few hours away. She said she had her son, her other son, apparently, send the check for the room rental to secure it as she would be back soon and she wanted to let me know that she was serious. I told Margaret that the amount was $2,000 and that the room rent and deposit was only $900. She was upset, saying her son never listens, and she told him to write the check for $900 from his account and that she had not had time to establish a bank account here. She told me to go ahead and cash the check, and if I could, go ahead and take out my $900 and take the difference and go ahead and buy some Steam game cards with them and message them to her. She would just give the cards to her grandson to use for his online games. Margaret told me she would be meeting with me soon as they returned to town, and that she was at the hospital with her family and watching her grandson. Margaret then sent photos of a woman laying in a hospital bed who she said was her daughter in law. She said the Steam game cards would keep her grandson occupied. I told her she needs to sign the leasing agreement and I could email it to her, but she says she was unsure how to sign in through email. She told me just cash the check and kept urging me to cash it. Then she said make sure I use the difference to buy Steam cards as her grandson was so bored and it could keep his mind off his mom being so sick while he plays games on his phone. I felt bad for this woman's grandson. Here mom is in the hospital with cancer and the poor child is bored and doesn't realize what's going on. I went ahead and deposited the check and I took out the difference in my savings and bought the cards. I had a heck of a time finding these game Steam cards, but I did give them to Margaret via message. She told me her daughter-in-law is doing worse and they were not sure when they would be back. I told her, don't worry, her room is secure and I deposited the check and I'll hold her lease and keys until she's back in town. We even joked about how we should have a girls' night out and eat a nice dinner to get to know each other and relax after this whole ordeal. After sending Margaret the card, she thanked me and I heard nothing further. I asked her to please let me know what's going on when she can. It was a few days later when I received an alert from my bank that the check I had deposited was returned as not being valid. I had to go to my bank to figure out what was going on. They told me that the check was not valid. My bank ended up charging me a fee, and I was also out the money for the Steam cards. I tried calling Margaret right away, and her number went to a voicemail service. I then sent her a text message and a message from the neighborhood app. They were all not replied to. It was at this point I was really scared and I didn't know if this was just an innocent mistake or what, but I told her she owes me the money for the cards and the fee the bank charged. I told her we need to meet in person if she still wants the room, but at this point, I don't want to go any further with this unless it's straightened out. The very next night, I received a phone call from Margaret's number. But it was not Margaret. It was a man who called me, telling me that I needed to buy $500 worth of Apple gift cards and send them now. I could hardly understand him as his accent was extremely thick. This man then gave me my address, spoke it word for word, and described the outside of my home. I had never sent Margaret pictures of the front outside of my home, just the room and the gate entry. He told me that I have 24 hours to get $500 cards and that he had my address and he knew where I lived. I remember my heart beating fast as I didn't know who I was dealing with. I told him to put Margaret on the phone and he laughed, calling me an old fool. He then demanded I get the gift cards. I hung up on him and blocked the number and blocked the text messages. I did post in the neighborhood group describing what had just happened, and quite a few people told me it was a scam and likely a scammer in another country trying to scam and scare me into sending more gift cards. I started to feel somewhat better, thinking maybe this person is in another country. I did have one woman reach out to me asking about the details. I showed her the picture and asked if she knew this Margaret around town. She told me she checked the photos and that the pictures of this Margaret woman are used in scams in France. That scammers use this woman's photos claiming to be a sick woman with millions of dollars that she needs to give away. She gave me the link to her photos and showed me how to check these things. I was thankful for all her help, but felt so stupid and unsafe. I wasn't sure who the man was or if he was going to come to my home. I started to receive phone calls from numbers in other countries. Most times they wouldn't speak or they would ask for me by name and then hang up. I ended up changing my phone number. I was out quite a lot of money by the time I paid the bank fees and got everything straightened out. I never found out who mailed that check. The return address was to a postal mailing center and not a physical home. I stopped advertising for a roommate online. I did, however, find a very nice lady to share my home with, but I met her at the community center, not on the internet. For the time, it was a nightmare, and I did spend a few weeks jumping at every noise outside my home, but no one ever came to my house. Thank you, that is my story. We'd like to thank this lady for sharing her story. Unfortunately, rental scams are extremely popular right now, especially with housing shortages and difficulty in finding affordable rentals. Always remember, if you advertise a room for rent or if you reply to an ad for a room for rent or a house for rent, never send gift cards, never send checks or money through the mail. Always meet them in person and get everything in writing and do your homework. If you'd like to share your encounter, whether you lost money or not, whether it's a rental scam or a romance scammer, you can find us scammingscammers@gmail.com. You can also find us on FB, Scamming Cyber Education. Drop us an inbox there as well, and we'll be happy to share your story and narrate it into a video. Until next time, stay safe.